Hello, everybody. Welcome to our live MPL session. I am Daniel, one half of the duo behind the Modern People Leader. You'll meet Stephen here in a second. If this is your first time joining us, we are so glad that you're here. And if you're a longtime listener, welcome back. Yeah, the Huerta Bros. And today we're diving into something that it feels like we used to talk about almost every episode, which is employee connection. And it's funny, like last night we had a dinner with 15 CPOs, and this topic seemed to come back up for the first time in a while. And again today in a podcast we recorded, it came up again. So um, it feels like a perfect time for us to be having this conversation. And we've got an amazing lineup today with Geanne, the director of employee experience at Charlie Health, Allison, the VP of People Ops and head of employee experience at Dropbox, Nick, who is the co-CEO at Marco, and our former guest, Brian Elliott from Workford. But before we jump into the convo, we always kick off every Modern People Leader episode or conversation the same way, and that's with good news stories. And so if you've got some good news to celebrate, please drop it in the chat. And on our side, Steven, I'm going to pick on you. How about you go first?
Ooh, we've been recording a lot lately. We recorded an episode about 2 hours ago. So good news can be difficult. I'm gonna go with I have recently picked up vibe coding. I have longtime entrepreneur, never been able to code, and Daniel's sick of me talking about this, but my mind has truly been blown. I have built my first back end APIs, front end, fully functioning website. I'm expanding that now to a newsletter just because I had so much fun. So I've learned some new superpowers is my good news. And if you haven't tried coding with AI, you should go try it today. It's crazy.
It really is. And I can go next. This has been a marathon for the Modern People Leader the last week. So in the last, I guess, like 7 to 9 days, we've recorded 5 episodes. We hosted a Modern People Leader dinner in Austin last night, and today we're doing a webinar. And so um, I always love like these really busy weeks. Feels like we always have like, a month of downtime, and it feels like there's nothing going on, and then everything hits at once. And so my good news is I survived, or we survived. And so yeah, that's my good news. Guion, you want to go next?
Yeah, I'll go next. I'll keep on the theme of offsites. We actually are have our 400 person offsite in 3 weeks, and I think I have made the last adjustment to the rooming list. If any of you have planned offsites, you know the rooming list is like looking at a spreadsheet with a million names and codes, and I think we're done. So that's my good news for today.
Nick, how about you go next?
Wow, sounds like we're all talking about offsites. Last week, we actually had a team offsite in Atlanta. We shipped the public beta of this product that we're really excited to announce called Instant Offsites. But we got everyone together. We're a remote team, and we wanted to recreate that launch moment of like I used to work at Facebook, and there are these things called war rooms where you all got together and like got to push the button. It's like that SpaceX moment. And that was that moment last week, and it was really special because we've all been working for this for 6 months, and it's finally live, and people are starting to get to use it.
Congrats. It's exciting. Allison, you want to go next?
Sure, I was going to do something else, but now I'm going to fall on the theme of offsites. In 3 weeks, we have our one of my team's people analytics. We have our team offsite in Chicago. I'm very excited. I love Chicago in the summer. I think it will be so fun to be with the team, and we've got like 4 new team members, so it's going to be great to meet them in person for the first time.
And that leaves Brian.
Hey, I got to do something at least a little bit different from offsites. So I'm going to play around with the fact that I'm actually really happy right now. My good news is I live in San Francisco. It's 56 degrees and chilly, and so we all tend to gripe. But this week, it's really awesome because all of my friends that are not in San Francisco are roasting, and I feel for you. So That's my good news bit.
You're just going to rub it in our face? That bad
I'm gonna
news for
just put it
everyone
right
else?
out there, Stephen. Sorry. Come on
Thanks for
in.
that.
Come on up to San Francisco. It's safe. It's lovely.
Oh my
It's a little
God. I
chilly.
was there a month ago and I miss it. I miss that beautiful weather. And so, well, thank you everyone for joining us. Thanks for all the great news. Thanks for everyone, all the friends of MPL that I see in the comments and chat. If you haven't, this format's a little bit different. To Daniel's point, we love it because when you're a podcaster or a content creator, things can get repetitive. This format is very different. This is going to be fast and furious. So please be ready to keep up. And in particular, please drop your questions. We are going to carve out time at the end. There's never enough time. So help us make it easy to get your questions answered by dropping those in. And so, all right, let's get this party started. Today's topic is connection. What's broken, what's working, and what the future looks like for distributed teams, or really any team for that matter, because a lot of the things we're talking about apply to whatever work arrangement you have. As Daniel mentioned, this was a topic that was on repeat on the MPL for a solid 2 years. That's seriously no joke. We literally couldn't avoid the topic. It was something that all HR leaders were struggling with, employees were struggling, managers were, everyone was struggling with this topic. And today we rarely talk about connection in the workplace. And Brian, I want to start with you because I'm curious, is this because it's not a major problem for companies, or it's just not front of mind for HR leaders, or have things quieted down because there just aren't any good solutions to the problem? So what's the state of the union for employee connection?
I think that things have quieted down because people have gotten even more concerned about it in some weird ways. So engagement overall is down, right? So if you look at Gallup's State of the Workplace report that they put out like a month or two ago, Gallup tracks engagement, and it's down yet again sequentially year on year. Like 31% overall of employees are positively engaged at work. And it's even worse for managers. The manager number dropped from like 30 to 26%. And if your manager's not engaged, that's probably a bad sign for the rest of the team that's coming along. And people's connection with one another, continues to feel like it's suffering. I think the reason why we're paying less attention to it is because we're paying more attention to everything else around it that's actually causing some of those challenges around engagement, right? The demands to do more with less, generative AI adoption, return to office mandates, all that stuff is not necessarily adding to the mix here in a positive way. One of the challenges that I've seen, like just continually in working with organizations, is the teams that people work on are more distributed than they were post-pandemic. So even if people are coming back to an office, they're not coming back to one that has all of their team in it on a consistent basis. And that lack of engagement and connection can be a real challenge. A lot of you probably have seen Atlassian's data on this. They showed that even quarterly gatherings with your team boost engagement by 27%, and then that sense of engagement and connection with your team persists for like 3 to 5 months afterwards. And it's also really important for like new team members and new graduates in particular. And in fact, they found that was actually a lot better than chance encounters in the office. The challenge is that I think a lot of organizations have pulled back because of, we've gone from threats of a recession to threats of a recession. And so the money around gatherings keeps getting pulled back, especially by larger organizations. And even if you're pushing people back in, it's not really the people that you need to see to establish relationships with. And it takes just a little bit of work, just a modest amount of effort to make this stuff work. But you got to have the capability, the desire to do it. And even that little bit of work to do this is pretty substantial if you're not a large scale organization that has, fairly good sized teams. So we'll get into that, I'm sure, today. But, this is just continues to be an important topic that I think gets underserved, in part because I think a lot of people have said, I've got bigger fires, but they don't get that the bigger fires are getting worse because they're not paying attention to the fundamentals in the first place.
Well, this is the perfect foundation. I mean, I didn't have all the data points. I had some of it, but great foundation for us to build a conversation off of. And, there's more where this came from. If you don't follow Brian's newsletter, you should. I follow his Substack. It's absolutely great. And there's a lot more data to back some of the points that Brian just made. So building off of this, I want to keep moving forward because what really matters most. No offense, Brian and Nick, but it's the HR perspective, like the HR leaders that are out fighting the fight day in, day out. And so I'm super curious, Geanne, let's start with you first. Like from that lens, like what have the last couple of years been like for Charlie Health?
Yeah, I mean, as a still relatively new company, right? We've been around almost 5 years. We're still very much in that startup phase. Our team, specifically our sales team, has scaled from less than 10 people when I joined 4 years ago to we have our offsite in a couple of weeks with over almost 400 people. So fast growth in terms of our sales team. In the early days, it was super easy to stay connected, right? I think back to our first offsite. It was small, it was intimate. We were in an Airbnb. We literally had breakfast like on the floor around a coffee table. That connection really happened naturally. And as we've grown, we've had to be much more intentional with how we approach connection, especially at team outings like offsites. So in year two, we met at an outdoor retreat center in Minnesota that had a ton of learnings. The next 2 years following that, it brought us to large hotel conference rooms, right? Like we were too big of a team. We couldn't have the offsites like we had in the past. And then just in a few weeks, we'll be gathering in Austin with nearly 400 people. But I will tell you, even when our group was 100 to 150 people, we've always prioritized team building at these offsites. We survey our team. We hear loud and clear that this is one of the things that they desire the most. But as we scaled, we realized that if we wanted to preserve the sense of the connection that made our team so strong, we couldn't just rely on in-person moments, right? Like going into this offsite, how do we foster that sense of connection prior to that? We needed to build that connection into the experience year round, especially for our smaller, more newer regional teams across the country. So this year we've actually done something really fun leading up to our offsite. We've invested more in regional connections, and each region actually developed its own team name, their motto. From that team name and motto, we've created logos, we've created fun team videos. And this helped create this sense of pride and unity amongst our team. And then for the last couple of months, every week leading up to our offsite, we've done what we call Team Tuesday, where we've spotlighted a few of these teams through these fun videos. It's a great way to showcase their culture, the people on the team, their personality. And in a distributed organization like ours, where our entire sales team is remote, our culture doesn't just happen, right? I think this is a big thing that we've learned. It has to be designed. We learned that intentional connection isn't just a nice to have. It truly is the glue that keeps our growing team aligned, energized, and committed to our mission of getting people the life-saving mental health they need.
Oh my God. I love the notion of the team logo and kind of building camaraderie in that sense. Did you say Austin is your next offsite?
We are. So send
Gotta hang
all
out.
the cool weather, Brian, to Austin, Texas, in a couple of weeks,
Will
please.
do.
And,
Will do.
and we'll make sure. I don't know how likely that is, but I can commit to pointing you to some delicious tacos while you're in Texas and barbecue. So let's keep moving. So now we have the small company perspective. There's a lot of nuggets that you just shared there alone, Geanne. Allison, when you think back to making connection a cross-functional priority at Dropbox, what were some of the challenges that you encountered with your teams and leaders? Like share with us like the bigger company perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, at Dropbox, we were a very in-office culture before the pandemic hit. We were 97% in office, and we kind of had all those trappings that you think of when you think of like Silicon Valley, company. And so as a result, like our offices got really kind of viewed as these centers of culture, right? And so as we were reimagining our approach to work and thinking through what eventually became our virtual first working model, which means that we work primarily remotely, but we get together about once per quarter in person with our teams. We knew we needed to keep human connection at the core of everything we did. And even 5 years in, right, we still see there's really no substitute for human connection, and we continue to really prioritize that. So, as part of that, right, like what that means for our teams, We gather on a set cadence. It's typically about quarterly. We give budget for our teams to meet quarterly. We have a couple of ways in which people gather, anything from like co-working to more like traditional types of offsites. And I think the thing that we found several years in is this is incredibly critical to engagement. I know, Brian, you're bringing up some stats. I mean, we see actually the gathering experience for us as being the top driver of belonging at Dropbox, actually, and is absolutely critical to team effectiveness as well. But there are some challenges, certainly, right? Like doing this at scale, we have over 2,000 employees. I think something that, we really have been kind of like thinking through, right, are things like, for example, we give budget out right at the team level, but what we keep hearing from our teams and we've heard is we really want to be getting together with cross-functional partners. Like, it's so wonderful. I feel very connected with my, direct team, but how can I make sure that I'm feeling that same sense of, connection and trust with all of my cross-functional partners? So we do a lot of experimentation. And so, like, to answer that, for example, we introduced what we call these cross-functional anchor weeks timed around specific milestones last year that helps with that cross-functional connection. And we've also really had to kind of reimagine how we support this experience. And so, we had to create, for example, an offsite planning team to help our teams be able to gather, because it's a very new skill for so many people to be able to gather like this on kind of an ongoing basis. And so we've done a lot of experimentation, a lot of evolution, but again, we continue to invest in this model and invest in the gathering experience because it is so core to being able to operate with speed and efficiency and effectiveness when we're back working virtually. So it's that connection that happens when we're in person is so core to that.
I'm hearing a lot of intentionality, experimentation, and I love that there are a variety of different solutions that both you and Geanne shared. I'm really interested now to get, Nick, your perspective. You have the benefit of having helped thousands of companies work through this problem. In addition to what has already been shared, what are some unique challenges you've seen with, the world's best brands that you've worked with? What have they done to address these issues with connection?
Yeah, I think we're lucky. Like, yeah, we've gotten to work with distributed teams that like Dropbox, which really have kind of defined what this post-remote era looks like. And they, like, in the early days were like writing what the future of the office might look like and how people actually would go into a workspace, and Charlie Health as well too. But then we also get to work with companies who are really like doing this for the first time ever. You think about a planner or a booker who's just completely gotten this dropped on their plate. And a few of the common challenges that we see, one is the first thing, which is like how often. That's kind of one of the first things that we get. And companies like Dropbox and Charlie Health have nailed this. They talk about things like getting folks together every 6 months. Quarterly is ideal, like if you really have the budget. And then like making sure people get cross-functional face-to-face time every 12 months. But two other challenges that I think we see not only across like the experts, but then also people who are doing this for the first time, we see like two really big pain points. One of those is like, where do we go? And so when you're planning one of these, companies spend a lot of time on this, which is like, how do we like choose the right place, the right city? And really, there's a lot of things that you need to take into account here. Everything from like your teammate's location, how much travel time is on each end, what it's going to cost, and what your team's preferences are. And so just some like guidance and tips that we've been giving here across companies of all sizes is like for travel time, like really optimize for like direct flights and like keeping your ground transit time from a destination less than 2 hours, ideally less than one if it can happen. And then like location, if a lot of your team lives in one location, like let's say New York City, and you're gathering an hour or two outside of it, maybe something like upstate New York could be awesome. Folks really want to like get outside of their core space. A tool that we found really helpful for this, that we use both at our company and recommend to others, AI can really help, because there's so many things that go into this equation on like trying to solve the problem, like where do we go as a team? And no one can really take as many inputs kind of as AI. And then lastly, I think when you think about like collaborating in a team and like actually deciding on which place you're actually going to, we recommend thinking a lot kind of about like the common areas and the collaborative spaces, because that's really where your team spends the most time. That's where they get to connect. That's where they get the coffee chats. That's where they get the walking meetings, and the meeting space. That's where they'll be spending most of their day.
Love that. Tons of more practical solutions. So there's still a massive challenge with this, but there are a lot of things that companies are doing to kind of break through that. Um, when you experiment, when you try new things, there are always lessons learned. You don't always get it right. And I know that in the prep conversations we've had for this session, that there are some fails out there. And so I want to now dig into lessons learned. And so, when I think back to what we've talked about already, to me, the last few years have been a huge lesson in knee-jerk reactions. And that we have somewhat been forced to go through. Like, we had to do these things where it was really an operational pendulum swinging. Like, are we remote? We are remote. No JK. We're RTO. Like, ooh, that failed. So now we're going to be hybrid, something in between. And so for this segment, I want to start digging into those fails, like, the lessons, and more importantly, the lessons learned and where that guided you. What's worked, what didn't work, how did you evolve what you were doing? And again, I want to start with the research and data. Brian, what are some of the painful lessons that you've heard, through working with your clients and through kind of your position in the market? You've touched a lot of great brands, and so are there any stories that you can share with us? I guess in particular, one thing we've noticed a trend that team travel seems to be up. Like, I felt like that was a luxury pre-COVID. Maybe you got to travel to a cool place, every now and then, but now, like, a lot of these offsites and, I guess connection events are in these, require travel. So I'm curious, like, what is driving that, and what are some of the things that you've heard from the companies you've worked with?
Yeah, so like the worst of the bad stories were the ones that, still persist in some companies. But back in 2021, you told your managers they could hire people in more locations, and you told them that you'd give them budget to get their team together once a quarter. And then 2022 rolls around, and your CFO says, a recession coming, we're yanking the budget, right? And then 2023, they repeat the promise, and then it gets yanked again, and you're wondering why connection engagement are faltering. Those, by the way, are still all over the place. There's still a lot of companies that are doing that. There's also the workplace people that are really stuck in the middle, that are, they know they should shrink space and take some of the money and redesign what's left to make it work better for their teams. But they're fearful of the CEO changing their mind yet again and sending everybody back to the office. And that indecision just puts a lot of people in a bad spot. Given that, though, there's some really great bright spots. I've seen a lot of companies that have sort of migrated towards, look, we have to put some effort and time behind this, because the top-down mandate doesn't work, but the individual free-for-all doesn't either. It's not really helping us. Airbnb is a good case study on this. So I worked with them last year, and I'll drop a link in the chat to a write-up I did on them. But they live and work anywhere was their mantra starting in 2021. It helped them tremendously in terms of talent acquisition. Like, they got some great people from Apple, as one little example, that really just didn't want to, march back into an office 3 days a week. But they also found themselves 2 years later with, key people working on projects that were spread out across places that were a lot broader than the San Francisco Bay Area. And so last year, they basically came up with a rhythm that worked for their organization. They launched projects, they have big product launches twice a year. And these big product launches involve not just engineers and product managers and designers, it's marketing and comms and legal and other folks like that. And so they took a lot of the approach that Allison was describing, which is a milestone-based approach. So they do in-person weeks with a fairly good-sized group of people that come to San Francisco once a month for 3 days for the kickoff, for the M1 review, the M2 review, the M3 review as you go forward across this. And that once a month time ends up being a huge magnet for everybody else in the Bay Area, because all of a sudden you got a mess of people coming in. And for everybody else that's trying to decide, hey, when's a good time to come into the office, it becomes an opportunity to reconnect. I had the joy of actually being there for the first, second, and fourth one of these. And the energy and the vibe was just off the charts. It was just a really fantastic experience because, I'm going to steal this from Brian Chesky. if you're coming into the office every day, 4 or 5 days a week, it's a grind. You're seeing the same people, you're telling the same jokes, et cetera, et cetera. If you're seeing people that you haven't seen for a month, it feels special, right? There's a lot more energy and excitement that comes off of that. And so I think it's that like combinatorial effect that worked out really well for them. So I'll drop a link to that one. There's plenty of other examples too, including Allison's got some great stuff I know also.
Well, that's a perfect segue. And Allison, you mentioned in our prep call that you learned and unlearned a lot at Dropbox over time. So give us a peek behind the scenes of your learnings.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, Brian, I think, highlighted, so much there, which is one thing we've actually found is we did this more of like I don't know, qualitative sort of like research study around the value of in-person connection. And something that we actually found as part of that was when people are gathering in person, right? Number one, they want it to like be focused around the work. But number two, it's like there's something about the cadence within which we're doing this. Like again, every few months, it's keeping it special is like kind of like what we like when you're seeing each other, it feels special. And what we find is that it like is giving folks the sustenance that they need, right? When then they go back to working virtually, they've got that foundation of trust. They've got that the kind of they've worked through the communication and things like that in person. So those moments are super valuable. And but I think like in terms of specific things that we've both like learned and unlearned. So number one is we've really tried to think about the work in terms of, well, what is best, to happen sort of in person? What kind of work is best served to be doing virtually, right? Because we really try to lead with that to like determine kind of what, how we're kind of thinking about spending our quarters. And so I think in terms of in-person connection specifically, something that we've like learned over the last couple of years is that there are different kinds of modalities of gathering and also different group sizes that can then lead to specific outcomes. And so, for example, when we look at sort of immediate team gatherings, right? So like a manager and their set of, 10 folks on their team, that's actually very effective at supporting all outcomes across things like trusted relationships and communication. Whereas cross-functional team gatherings are actually effective at things like building trust and improving communication. We've gotten insights, for example, on ways within which we gather. So we have a couple different modalities. I'll just explain that. So traditional offsites you're probably very familiar with. Retreats we do as well when we're need to be in these really distraction-free kind of settings, and really focused on team building, for example, or focusing on innovation and developing creativity. That a use case for that is like a new leaders coming in. And then we do co-working style offsites, both at the immediate team level as well as the cross-functional team level. And what we found, again, are group sizes and the way in which we gather really drives these specific outcomes. And so as a result, we've created what we call like this gathering matrix model, where we ask teams to really kind of lead with, okay, what's the outcome we're trying to achieve? Which sounds really simple, but we don't always think through things in that way. And then design the entire experience around that. And that would potentially change like the size of the group that you're with, who you are going to invite to the meeting, or to the offsite as well. And then I would also say, I know we haven't talked a ton about sort of the virtual connection piece, but I think, that's something that I think, is so important for us. We think through that a lot because we spend about 90 to 95% of our time, working kind of in these, in a virtual setting. And connection can be really, really tricky, right? In those moments. And we see our managers specifically kind of facing some of the biggest challenges around this. And it's actually really like ineffective meeting practices, inconsistent note taking, things like that, that really drive these challenges. And so we're also experimenting with a ton on the virtual connection and collaboration side. So we're constantly doing pilots, but we also leverage a lot of intentionality in how we approach our virtual work as well. So we use structures like core collaboration hours, for example, or even mindsets like operating with an async by default mindset, which again create some challenges with connection. So that's why we've really tried to build in then some, kinds of team rituals that people can pull from when they're meeting virtually as well. So we really do try to kind of think about delineating the work in that way. But it's been a really interesting process. And I think the thing that has been sort of the biggest, sort of unlearn is like, yeah, we don't have to be in person every day with each other to build these meaningful relationships that allow us to work in a really effective way.
Yeah, I think that when you are able to conclude that like individually as a person, like that's a hard place to get. I think we've been on various journeys, and some people like have very specific things. So that's why there are companies that are committed to in office work. But I think what we have experienced is some of our best work is actually happen in a distributed fashion, in it over a sustained period of time. And the other thing that I just wanted to quickly comment on is I love me a decision-making matrix, and I love the fact that a matrix exists to help people think out like what is the right solution here, because it sounds like there are various forms of connection that have that deserve a spot in the playbook. And so having a matrix to help me figure out, okay, what am I going to use here to drive the connection I'm looking for seems like a genius move. And so let's keep moving. Geanne, I'm so curious to hear your learnings. You mentioned that your fully remote sales team asked you to build an offsite playbook from the ground up. I love the concept of another thing you shared was the concept of a workshop style event focused on peer learning. I think learning is another component and need for why we need to have team connection and we need to have these gatherings. And so, why do you think, what have your learnings been, just with those two examples and anything else that you've experimented with at the company?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm gonna go into the offsite playbook a little bit later, so I'll save that for that. But I have had so many learnings over the last couple of offsites. Before when our team was starting to get larger and larger, we just felt like we had to cram everything into our events. And what we've learned over time from serving the team is like they want to learn from each other. And that's really the approach we've taken with the last few offsites and the one we're really focusing on in the next couple of weeks. Our team is really diverse, right? Like we've been around for 4 years, so we have a number of team members who have, longer tenure in the sense of been here for 2, 3 years, 4 years. But we also have a range of experience, both in sales experience. Some individuals are coming to us with behavioral health, some are coming to us fresh out of college. And so what we find is that these in-person opportunities give us an incredible space to learn from one another. At our company, they hear from our learning and development team from leaders all the time. Like we really pour into the team from leadership and L&D level, but what they really crave are those moments to learn from one another. In the past, we've tried to like force a lot of learning, and then it's always when you're running over time, the workshop or the peer learning piece is the first to go so you can keep up with the agenda. And what we learned is like that is not the way to do it. You really have to be intentional with how you're carving out your time and creating your agenda at an offsite. So as we've given our team at large more opportunities to build connection outside of these larger gatherings, we give them the ability to connect with one another each quarter as a region. This has given us the opportunity to craft an agenda that really gives ample time to learn from subject matter experts and devote time to role playing and learning from one another. So for an example, if there is an hour and a half long period of time that we have devoted for a training at an offsite, we're being intentional with making sure that the bulk of that time is carved out to spend on workshops with an element of fun and competition. We're lucky in the sense that as a sales team, most everyone is super extroverted. People are motivated by competition. So we're really leaning into that with our offsites, making them fun and competitive. But this is going to get them to learn from one another while also having fun. We also make sure that seating is random. So again, because our teams are able to build connection with their smaller regions through other points throughout the year, we really want to create an environment where people from different backgrounds, from different tenure, from different regions learn from one another. So that really helps us scale across the org. It's really powerful to watch someone who's in Florida borrow a strategy from someone in Washington and then go out that and apply that the same week. It also helps create that sense of connection long after we leave the offsites. Because in the end, for us and the way we create our events, it's not just about delivering information. We want people, to Allison's point, we want them to leave feeling that they've increased their trust, that there's a shared language, and that there's momentum that they have gotten throughout each other. And that's really what makes it stick leaving the offsite and carrying through the rest of the year.
Love it, love it. And Daniel just pointed out that we're a little behind on time, so I would love to reflect. There are a lot of more nuggets there, but keeping us moving so we can get to Q&A. Nick, at Marco, you've created a lot of delightful experiences with a lot of various companies. I've got to imagine that there are some common patterns that you have seen over the last couple of years. So, share with us any what those patterns might be that you've seen, and any advice that you can give around future direction of team connection and events, and how the listeners and the people that are on this session with us, practical advice that they could take to their teams.
Definitely. I think we have to acknowledge, like, we all get so excited about, like, if we're going on our own trip and it's vacation, we get so excited about planning it. But if it's a team trip, sometimes like the fun goes out the window. And I think when you're really planning these, if I can give you one piece of advice, it's really around like optimizing for getting time back, so you can focus on planning the experience itself rather than all of the like painful logistics that go into it. Because at the end of the day, like, what the teams remember when you leave an offsite, it's those small, like, intentional moments of connection that they have that they'll remember forever. They'll remember the activities, the dinners, the water cooler moments, but they're not going to remember like the specific hotel room that they were in, the exact menu items that you put on the menu for dinner, or like their travel details and potentially what type of car they ended up in to get there. And I think, unfortunately, we see so many companies spend so much of the planning process like locking down the venue that it just eats into the timeline of like getting to plan the experience itself. Secondly, I think everyone's been talking about like saving money. Brian brought this up a lot earlier. Companies are trimming, they are trimming headcount, they're bringing in AI. And one thing we really see here is like companies overspend by 20 to 30% on most offsites and retreats. And if you can show your company that you can save money, amazing. And you have a lot of factors here working in your favor as you plan your next event. First off, like hotels, they love corporate teams. Like, you're not a wedding block. Hotels love you. Second, avoid staying on the weekends. Since you're probably staying like on a Monday through a Wednesday, typically Thursday, Friday, and Saturday nights are like the most expensive nights at a hotel. And so by avoiding those, there's a lot of savings to be had. And even just by adjusting like one day on your total offsite, you might see that there's a massive change in what you're spending. And lastly, think about like booking hotels. It's like Costco. You're buying in bulk. And so if you are booking as a group, there really are savings to be had. And if you stay at a hotel multiple times, you can get even more savings as you build a relationship with that hotel. Oh, and one last one. Lastly, we talked about like reconsidering dates. Also rethink destination. So for example, like if you're like, we really want to go to New York City and it's expensive those dates, a lot of teams are looking at kind of different destinations that you'll see where they're a lot more reasonable. Maybe if you're looking at New York, look at something like a Denver, a Nashville, a Scottsdale, and really compare those rates and see what makes the most sense for your company.
Love those tips. Before we keep it moving, I want to make sure that we answer some of the questions in the chat. There were so many good questions, and it's hard to just pick a couple. But I guess first we'll start with questions for Allison. So there was a question about the cross-functional anchor weeks and what companies are doing to increase engagement and excitement leading up to the offsite gathering. So just like learning a little bit more about that. And then there was another question for you, Allison, about core collaboration hours and what that is.
Yeah. So anchor weeks, we really try to plan those around key milestones and deliverables, right? It's mainly our engineering, product design, kind of cross-functional teams that leverage those. So we actually have started leveraging them actually across the company. We're actually going to do like a planning anchor week for our leadership team this fall. And I think actually because they're so intentionally designed around specific milestones, people there's already some inherently, I think, some engagement there that comes because hey, we're gathering this week because it's going to help accelerate us for the big product launch that's coming up in however many weeks. So they're just inherently, I think, is it because it's well designed and thoughtful around those specific dates that comes with it. But we certainly, do things like we create like a very snazzy agenda. There's usually swag. And even though anchor weeks are very focused around output and like productivity, we also have fun moments that are built in, right? Like at Dropbox, we have a big karaoke culture. I was actually talking about this earlier with Steven. So there's always like a karaoke night. There's, there will be some fun kind of social things, but we also will build in we'll give kind of like weekly updates. Often there might be things that people need to do to prepare for it. So that helps drive some engagement as well. But I think like because people do get energized and we are only seeing each other in these particular moments, like I do think that helps quite a bit. So we actually don't really see like we've really got to drag people to these things because there's a lot of excitement just around it. And again, because you're seeing cross-functional partners a lot that you haven't seen before, that helps. But again, we'll set up a Slack channel. There will be like updates that will come weekly. There might be like things that people need to do in advance as well. So those are all parts of it. And then in terms of core collaboration hours, so this is something that we've had in place since we kicked off virtual first about 5 years ago, knowing we're completely distributed across the globe. And so we're working across time zones, and how can we do that effectively, but also be able to enable the amount of focus time that we need, because I think we really wanted to make this shift from this like we're in meetings all day to like an async by default culture. If we're going to do that, we actually then need set times that we can collaborate as well, so that we're so let me practically to explain it, we have a core collaboration hours by region, so North America, Europe, and then the APAC region, and we align that to where we have the most critical mass of employees. So in North America, that's Pacific time zone, and so our core collaboration hours are 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. Pacific time, which means that our New York City folks that live in New York, for example, we can be able to collaborate. That's in the afternoon their time. We also design them to work with other regions as well. So for example, like we'll ask people to flex an hour before that, for example, to meet with European team members, and then meet later in the day, of course, for APAC members. So at a high level, that's how it works, but it's about both collaboration and also really trying to enable and maximize focus time.
Okay, and I'm seeing a question in the chat from Nate. What is one thing you'd say to executives who have cut all offsites and team building events because they don't see the benefit and don't seem to care to see any of the benefits?
I'll take that one. I chatted with a chief people officer of a research-oriented firm about this one. She brought up the example with me because she'd actually figured it out. Scientist CEO who didn't believe that time together and getting to know one another better was really that important. So she actually got him to commit to trying it just once with his own team. And what they did is they had a pretty well-designed offsite that was going back to some what Geanne was talking about. Geanne was talking about too. The 50-50 blend of understanding one another better, but also focusing on like a really key thing that they were working on and trying to get alignment around what the goals were and how they were going to, who's going to take responsibility for what. But then also going deeper with each other about how they worked, how they operated, and what their preferences were. CEO came out of it and said, that was the best thing ever. Can we do that again next month? And so part of this is like getting them to have that experience. I think the other thing to do, especially with executives who are more like just do the work oriented, is this helps you accelerate the work. This isn't about just having fun. This is about how do you gain alignment across people. The best examples that I've got on this is start off with a conversation. If you can accomplish one thing from a business perspective, make it is the entire team aligned around what goal it is that we've got for this project or for this team for the next quarter. Do we all understand what good looks like? If you can accomplish that, then everything else gets a lot easier. You can also talk about how you work together. Allison was talking about this, in terms of your team norms and how they operate. All of those conversations also build connection with people, and they help you accelerate the work after you come out of it. And that's what I think a lot of people who've made this investment have found is it's not just a feel good, do we feel engaged, do we feel connected? It's do we understand each other better? Do we understand the work in front of us? Do we understand our roles and responsibilities to carry this off? I give you a
Yeah,
long answer to a short question.
yeah, I'm like, it's shocking that is a perspective, a leadership perspective, but I think it's real. And Daniel, thank you for asking that and getting an answer, midstream. But the number one thing we hear from our listeners, why they come back and listen to the show, is because we give actionable playbooks as part of the conversations. We're able to dig in and kind of get things that you can take back to your teams and literally start jamming on today, implementing like next week. And so this last section, we're running short on time. So in your most kind of succinct possible way, we want to enter the future playbook and what's emerging as kind of the best practice as it relates to connection. Um, and so I want to start with Allison. Oh, sorry. I want to start with Geanne. Geanne, can you share kind of what the playbook looks like that's emerging for you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I really started to design this because I saw a huge need, right? Like what we do for our sales, our outreach org is very different from what we're doing for the rest of Charlie Health. And I saw teams like craving the sense of connection and not knowing where to start. So I wanted to create a best practice playbook that other teams can lead on, that really walks them through the basic rules just around offsites. Yeah, that's going to be important, right? Like, how do you approach this with finance? What are the spreadsheets you need to fill out? Like, all that is important, but I wanted it to be something that gives them tips and insight into why events like this matter. So exactly what we were talking about, right? The data. How do you craft events that allow you to have measurable outputs? For us as a sales team, it's easier because, of course, we want to see our sales productivity increase. We want to see more clients get into care. So I know it's not always as easy for other teams, but for us, that's a big part of it. And really walking through how do you plan intentionally every step of the way? Like, what do good pre-surveys look like? How do you take that information, then synthesize down into an agenda? What does a post survey look like? What are the things that are going to be important to share back to finance, share back to leadership? And so for us, when we're thinking of like frequency, cadence, it starts for us in our learning and development team from the very moment someone joins our sales team. So I actually include that in the playbook. The moment they start onboarding, we match them up with a mentor that they travel to in week 3, because that is setting the tone that is really important to us and our culture. And then each quarter, regions get together. The regional director, which is the leader of that region, plans that. 2 times a year, we have our senior sales leaders get together. 1 time a year, we have the regional leaders, and then 1 time we have an entire sales team. So we really do have a cadence that we follow. And something new this year that kind of just goes into how connection is so important to us. One of our top sales incentives is a founder's trip. We were founded in Bozeman, Montana. Our team craves that connection to our mission, to each other. And so we're trying to figure out what are ways that we can incentivize our team to want to be together even more. And what we're finding is that is one of the top things people are striving for, right? So that is in itself driving performance of our team, which is really exciting to see. And included in this playbook is just like things that I've learned the hard way, right? I started planning offsites just by like searching and scounging Google, doing tons of emails out to hotels, and it wasn't helpful. And luckily, I found companies like Marco who do that, and so that is definitely in my playbook. Just like, how do you start to source locations? How do you take into account flight times and all of that? And I hope that it helps other teams across our org.
There's a huge, I mean, planning all of our NPL live events, there's a huge amount of admin that's involved. Just venue selection, like the list go travel, the list goes on and on. And so having help there can be, a game changer for sure. Allison, you're up next. Share with us what the Dropbox connection playbook looks like.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I've talked a little bit about some of the cadence and, frequency that we look at for our gatherings. And that's something that, is communicated actually to candidates even, right? Like as they're coming into Dropbox, and something that we talk about in onboarding as well. But in terms of our like actual playbooks for say gathering in person, we created offsite in a box, essentially, which is, I mentioned we have an offsite planning team, which is something that we basically, it's like an end-to-end sort of like event, concierge. I know this is not feasible for a lot of companies and teams that are out there, but for us, it was like really trying to reimagine, like, hey, we've completely reinvented the workplace and like what this looks like. So we actually need to now rethink the how we support this. So we certainly will provide like more of like a white glove experience to teams that will come in. That offsite planning team plans about 30% of our offsites. But again, that's only 30% of our offsites. So that's where offsite in a box comes in, which is essentially is open source every playbook that all of our offsite planners use. So it includes everything from like location specific playbooks. It's about certainly bringing that matrix to life and guiding people through how to think through planning a really intentional gathering. We have a huge content repository, experience repository that's also by location as well. And so again, we really are always trying to focus, I think, on, this is such valuable time that we have together. How can we like continue to up level this and again scale it? Because, across several thousand people, you're never gonna be able to like plan all of these gatherings together. But then I also would cite, it's like from a virtual perspective too, we have a lot of team rituals that we really do try to embed in how we work day to day and how we think about connection and building relationships. And we do have a virtual first toolkit. I can drop the link in the chat as well. But we actually have a lot of kind of team rituals, getting to know your team. I even saw someone had a question about for introverts, like how do you manage your energy? We actually have a practice on how you can manage your energy when you're in person together. So that's a side note. We do have some in-person practices on there as well. But these are the types of, things again, what's the best way to kind of like kick off a meeting, for example, and conduct a meeting as well to keep folks engaged. So these are some of, and again, similar kind of to how we think about that offsite in a box. The Virtual First Toolkit is about open sourcing all of our practices and toolkits for everyone to actually be able to access too. So I think that's something that's been actually a really important part of this like learning mindset that we've taken with Virtual First too.
Awesome. It always boggles my mind how an hour goes by so quickly. Brian, since you answered the last question, I'm going to skip over you. Sorry, buddy. But Nick, bring it home for us before we open it up for, a few more questions for Q&A. Again, we love bringing the perspective of, an innovation perspective to these conversations. And so what are some of the innovative things that you're seeing in the emerging playbook with the companies you work with?
Yeah, I think if we like first mention like traveling for companies, if you're traveling alone, it's like never been easier. If you're booking a room for a business trip or you're a single teammate traveling to another office, amazing. Like you can do that instantly. You can book that in minutes. Navan, Engine, Concur, all great products. I think we've seen though is like all of these platforms are built for traveling alone and like your personal preferences. So like what size the room is, how comfortable the bed is, how fast the Wi-Fi is. But everything that we've talked today, this is about how this has kind of changed in the last 1 to 2 years. And we see this whole new bucket of group travel like skyrocketing. And we see that naturally across these companies. Brian mentioned this earlier. We see like corporate travel spend, group travel has now become almost a third of what companies spend on their overall corporate travel budget, which is kind of crazy to see.
It's crazy.
The last few years. And the tools just haven't really caught up. So let's say you need to book 10 plus hotel rooms for your next offsite, your retreat, or like a sales kickoff. You actually can't do that online. You're going to hotel websites, endless emails, all these phone calls, these super confusing contracts. And then you're like scouring the websites, looking to see if this is even a fit for your company because you can't find pictures of like their meeting spaces or where your team might hang out after the meetings are over. And then lastly, like we mentioned earlier, companies just then end up overspending by like 20 to 30% because they're totally missing out on these group rates. So fortunately, like there's a few new incumbents in the space that are really trying to make like the legacy travel space a lot better. And some of those, for example, not just Marco, others that are great are Engine, which is like a bigger player, and Team Out, which is like another great startup kind of trying to tackle this. But I think just quick little plug for Marco, there's a few quick ways how we're kind of uniquely approaching this from like, really, like I mentioned earlier, AI is a really powerful tool to help you match with things that are the best fit for your team and actually help you book these 10 plus hotel rooms. Secondly, there's 20 to 30% savings to be had guaranteed here. And transparent pricing is helpful because so many hotels hide in things like the hidden fees, the resort fees, these taxes that vary by city, district, state. And then lastly, it's important, like if you don't have an incredible team of experts like you do at Dropbox and Charlie Health, to be able to get access to those for free. And you can have as much interaction with them or as little interaction as you want. And so you can kind of get that here at Marco.
Love all of that, and thank you all for for giving it the rapid version of the playbook. We, like I said in the beginning, we never have enough time for Q&A. So Daniel, I'm going to hand it over to you to kind of highlight some of the best questions that we've gotten in the chat.
Yeah, so we have a question from Danielle. Would love to understand how other companies align different cultures where there's a subculture in office versus less engaged in a remote environment.
I'd probably say part of that is actually getting people together with gatherings, right? So there's two things to that, which is the in-person. You gotta, if you don't invest in it, you're not going to fix it bluntly, right? If you don't find a way to get people together on at least some quarterly frequency, it's gonna be really hard to overcome that. The second is you got to take the in-office culture stuff and do it online too. So some of what Allison was describing and what's in their virtual first toolkit are fantastic examples. Two of my favorites are doesn't matter if the meeting is quote unquote in an office, hybrid, or online. Start off your weekly team meetings with an icebreaker. Spend the 15 minutes unproductively. This is back to some execs will hate this because they think it's unproductive time. But that first 10, 15 minutes that you're spending every week on some degree of social connection, where do you stand on pumpkin spice latte, being my classic, gets people talking question, will yield dividends for you. And the other is find a way to share with each other. I am a personal fan of personal user manuals. So having everybody in my team where the manager goes first, share out how they operate, how they work, where they live, who they are, and all that. Just start building those connections across people.
Those are great tips. We have a question from Tyler. What do you provide to leadership who wants to see a measurement of success or some sort of proof that the time was truly valuable? Is it poll surveys? Maybe, like what are the best ways of doing this? And Geanne, I'm gonna pick on you. Any response there?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, ideally, we want to see this carry through on pulse surveys, but I think the individuals who are leading these events and creating them, it's super important that immediately following the event, you create some type of survey yourself and you ask the questions that you know are going to be important to your leadership team, right? Like rate your increase of feelings of connection. What are your takeaways? And then you create a summary and you share that back up with leadership. I think that is super important. And then you watch for these things on larger company-wide poll surveys, of course, but creating that survey immediately following the event is my biggest tip.
And it looks like we have time for one more question. So I think we briefly touched on this, but someone had a question for the introverts. Like for the people that are going to get tired of seeing the same people every day for a week or two, how do you design an experience for that segment of folks?
I can share a funny idea that we did last year. So again, most of our team is extrovert. So for the introverts on our team, these events are incredibly overwhelming. And so during meal times, we have tables set up where it's like, you connect with people who have kids, connect with people who like true crime mystery. And then we have a table that's like, sit here if you like don't want to talk to people for the next hour. And so it bonds those introverts, but I love it. I've joked around like, do we need to have a card that's like I don't like hugs? We haven't gotten that far, but the table is has been super helpful.
Well, all great things must come to an end. And we're at that point in the conversation where we need to bring it to a close. These are always MPL sandwiches. So, we have an MPL tradition at the beginning and we have one at the end. What we wrap these sessions up with is what we call one word or phrase close. We all choose a word or a few. And for those that are in the chat, or for those of you that have joined us, drop your one word close in the chat. We like for our guests to go first. So I'm going to Allison, why don't you start us off with a one word close?
Stay inspired. I learned a lot. Pass it. Brian.
Engagement accelerates the work.
I'll go grateful.
I'll go next. Human.
I'll go next. I ever since he said it, I can't get it out of my head, and that's pumpkin spice latte.
Hey.
And that leaves you, Nick.
Intentionality.
Intentionality. Well, this has been a super intentional session. Thanks to everyone that all of our panelists for being so intentional and following our format and our feedback. Thank you to all of the people that attended today's session. We can't do this without you. We're going to be sharing links and lots of information as a follow-up. So I guess that's goodbye for now. Thanks, everyone.
See y'all.
Bye.
See everybody.
Bye.
Bye.